Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to chapter 3. This is the second video of the chapter. So if you didn't see me wearing this blue shirt in a previous video, then go back and look for vocabulary. That was your first one. This is the second one. We are now going into the notes, talking a lot about the stuff that we mentioned in vocab, but going into greater detail and with some animations and cool things. So let's jump right in. All right. Unit number 3, or chapter number 3, bioenergetics. Just a reminder, we said this in the last video. Bio means life. Energetics, energy. So we are actually talking about life energy, the energy of things keeping you alive. And today we're only covering the basics. Or we're going to talk about photosynthesis and cellular respiration today in brief, but we're going to go into greater detail in different videos. So let's go into the basics. And our first basic information is the sun is the main energy source for all life on this planet. The main source. Right? I mentioned it in the last video that technically you could consider a rocket ship solar powered, being that the fuel got its energy when it was alive as a plant, getting energy from the sun. Right? The sun charges everything on this planet, with the express exception of anything underground or at the bottom of the ocean where there is no sunlight. There's geothermal energy down there, but we're not talking about that. So a vast majority of life is going to be solar powered. And how all this works, guys, this is a food pyramid we're looking at. All the sunlight comes down, but this bird, this snake, this rabbit, this cow, they're not actually utilizing this solar energy directly. So we don't consider them solar powered in the sense that they're just sitting out in the sun and basking in all of the sun's glory and being fed that way. No, we are depending on these plants, this tree, the grass, the flowers. They are soaking up all the sunlight. And what we're going to talk about today is how this happens. They're going to soak in the sunlight, turn that energy into food energy. And then the herbivores, the cows and the rabbits, eat the plants and they get the energy. And then a snake, so a consumer, will eat the herbivore and it will get the energy. And then another animal eats that animal and that animal gets the energy, so on and so forth down the line. All right, so all of that energy that the bird got from the snake, that came from the rabbit, came from the plants, originally came from the sun. That's what it's all about. All right. Anyway, where it says not in the notes, just listen. All right. I'm not expecting you to write all this stuff down because you should already have this in the vocabulary. Sunlight is the electromagnetic energy. All right. That's your vocab word, electromagnetic energy. All energy from the sun, and we have different kinds ranging. We talked about this in vocab as well, so I won't go into so much detail. Going from radio all the way to gamma, and actually beyond those as well. What it comes down to is the wavelength, and we care about very specific wavelengths. Really, we care a lot about reds and blues. Yeah, reds and blue. That's weird. You think green, right? We're talking about plants. You think green. Turns out plants don't actually like green too much. That's actually why we see green plants, is because the plants are soaking in all of the red. They're soaking in all of the blue. They're inside the plant now. We don't see inside the plant. We see what's bouncing off of the plant into our eyes. Yellows and greens, mostly green. So that's why plants look green to us, because the plants don't want the green. They throw it away and goes back into our eyes, and we see the color green. So plants are going to turn red and blue energy into food energy somehow. So let's talk about how that happens. First off, going back to chapter 1, autotrophs is our fancy word for any living thing that can do what we just said. Any living organism that can take solar energy and turn it into food energy is considered an autotroph. Let's break this word down. Auto, automatic, meaning it does it on its own. And then Troph, having to do with food. Anytime you see the word troph or trough, depending on how you want to pronounce it, that means food. So automatic food. Organisms that have the ability to use sunlight to produce food. Some examples here. This is algae. This is the green stuff that grows in your fish tank. If your filter breaks, it turns out those green things floating around are little microscopic living things. And they are turning sunlight into food, and the fish will eat the algae. If you have the right kind of fish, technically you wouldn't have to feed them. So what's going to go in here? Carbon dioxide and water go into the organism, and sunlight is going to be used to energize a chemical reaction. We're going to take this carbon and the H2O, put them together, so carbohydrate. And the carbohydrate we care about them making is called glucose. Right? That is the monomer for the larger carbohydrates. So we care about that. And oxygen. Right? Dioxide, 2 oxygens. We breathe O2 molecules. Right? We don't breathe just oxygen. We breathe 2 oxygen molecules together. Right? That's O2. And that's what these guys are going to release. Food and air for us. Heterotrophs, that's us. Organisms that obtain energy from consuming food. This happy face eating pasta. Pasta is made out of grains. Grains are from plants. So the plants put food energy, chemical energy into the grains. We made pasta out of it, spaghetti, and this guy is getting the chemical energy. Some types of heterotrophs. Herbivores are the ones that are going to be eating the plants. And then carnivores are going to eat the herbivores, and then they are going to get the energy. And then omnivores eat both. So we are going to get a lot of energy from the plant life that we eat, mostly the bread. But we care about the meat because high in protein, and we use that to build our bodies up. So we are getting both, and we do get a little energy from that as well. And then decomposers are kind of weird. They're kind of backwards. Like when you eat food, you don't use all of the food, right? It goes through your digestive system. You use what your body wants, and what your body doesn't want, you go to the bathroom to get rid of, right? Well, decomposers disagree with us. They like the stuff that you don't want. The stuff that you get rid of by going to the bathroom is what decomposers considers good eating. So if you left food out around some mushrooms, they would break down the food by absorbing all of what we would consider the bad stuff, and they would leave the good stuff behind. So they're still technically eating. They're just eating the bad stuff, leaving the good stuff, and what's left, that good stuff left behind, is known as fertilizer. You throw that good fertilizer into your garden, the plants gobble up all the good molecules so that you can eat the plants and get the good molecules, and now they're inside you. We call this the circle of life. All right. So we talked about this in the vocabulary. We talked a lot about this in chapter 2. We are focusing on this in this chapter. Carbohydrates store and transport energy. Our bodies cannot use energy directly from the carbs out. This is a weird thing, I know. You eat the carbohydrate, you break open the carbohydrate, and technically that much energy would destroy your cells. Yeah, break open the glucose and boom, your cell has exploded. We don't want that to happen. We will die, right, if all of your cells just suddenly explode. So we instead are going to spread this energy out. Right? We're going to charge up battery molecules that we call ATP. And before this, I want you to imagine something for me, okay? I want you to imagine that your phone died. The horror! What are you going to do now? Right? Your phone, you got to charge it. I don't have a charger, but I can rig one up. Right? I'm going to come in with this really big car battery, and I'm going to hook that car battery up to your phone. What's going to happen? Right, I'm going to fry your phone. That's bad. But what if I got, I don't know, say 30 something cell phone batteries, 38 batteries, and hook all of them up to the car battery at the same time. Then all of that energy gets spread out. So it's not as powerful going into your phone, it's going into all the other phones too. So now all 38 batteries are getting charged. And now you throw one battery into your phone and you have a functioning phone. When that battery dies, you take it out, put a fresh one in. You got 38 charged batteries to go before you ever got to recharge again. That is what we are doing in our bodies. ATP is going to be our charged batteries. And we can use one glucose molecule to charge up 38 ATP batteries. And then we use those as we need them. So take a look at this guy. Let's call him Steve. Hi, Steve. Steve is hungry. He needs energy. He's going to pass out soon from lack of energy. Luckily, we have all these energy-rich, carbohydrate-filled foods for Steve to eat. So, Steve, eat up. All these glucose, Steve should be happy. Steve, are you happy? No, Steve's still sad. Why? Because that energy is still in the glucose. He can't use it if it's trapped in here. So we need to break it open. We need to release it. So how are we going to do that? Let's take one of those glucose and let's take our dead batteries. Remember, ADP from your vocab, adenosine diphosphate, is a dead battery. We need to charge it up. So there you go. Actually, we do have a little bit of energy, but we can't use that because of reasons. And remember, one car battery for 38 cell phone batteries, right? One glucose for 38 ADPs. And we are going to go through a whole big process called cellular respiration. We will go into those details, I promise you, to break open this glucose, get the energy out to charge up 38 ADP batteries. Boom, 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 fully charged. And now we're going to cap it off with another phosphate, right? That's a molecule. We're going to put a phosphate molecule on there to hold the energy in, right? Think of it like a lid. ADP, when it's fully charged, we put in a phosphate lid, so now it's ATP. We added a third phosphate, so it's adenosine triphosphate, 3 phosphates. Nice and easy. And now we will just use these batteries, and Steve is happy. Thanks, Steve. So how do we do that? How do we charge that ATP? Like I said, this was not in the notes handout. This was actually something that I pulled from my anatomy notes. I just threw it in here as a reference for you guys. How are we going to charge that ATP up? Through use of cellular respiration and a fancy molecule we know as oxygen. If you remember from the vocab, we said that plants throw oxygen away. They don't want it. So we are going to take that oxygen and put it back in to undo everything. And that's how you're going to re-break it open into the pieces it originally was to get the energy out. That is called cellular respiration. We're going to use it to charge up our ADP into ATP, and oxygen is going to be our ingredient to make that happen. So what we got here, that's your carbohydrate. 6 carbons and 6 waters. H2O 6 times becomes H12O6. So 6 carbons, 6 waters, that's what's used to make 1 carbohydrate. Down here are ADPs. There's your adenosine and your diphosphates, 2 phosphates. Now I should have 38 of them. I tried. It was so small you couldn't see anything. So just imagine there are 38. Right. What we're going to do is unlock this. This is a treasure chest full of energy. Every treasure chest needs a key. Well, since we have 6 carbons and 6 waters, we're going to need 6 oxygens. That's you breathing. All right, guys, take a deep breath. boom. Energy comes out and charges them into ATP. Show that again. Take a deep breath. Oxygen's in your body. All that oxygen goes into your mitochondria, meets up with the carbohydrates, and boom, breaks it open, and all that energy goes into your ADPs. You cap them off with a third phosphate, and now it's ATP. That's what we use to survive. These are our energy molecules. So what are these molecules? ATP. I'll say, this is a word, guys, I will repeat so often you're going to be sick of hearing me. ATP. But this is wrong. That should say adenosine, right? Not adenine. Please make that correction. That's in your paperwork. This is adenine. Adenine and a ribose together is adenosine. So this should say adenosine triphosphate, 3 phosphates. This is your fully charged battery. All that energy is in between these 2 phosphates. And like I said, made of adenine, ribose, and 3 phosphates, right here. We want to rip this phosphate off to get the energy in between to survive. Every action that you do, if you blink, that takes you ripping a phosphate off of this and getting energy out. If you even think, that requires energy, okay? So we need a lot of these. The 3 phosphates are the important part because that is where that energy is. We break that bond, we break that bond and get the energy out. Now here's the thing, ATP doesn't last very long. We got like a few seconds at best. So we are actually going to be storing carbohydrates all across your body. Where do you store things, guys? That's right, in your fat. Fat is your storage. We talked about that last chapter. So that's why you have fat across your entire body, underneath your skin, in between your muscles, everywhere. Fat is a good thing. Too much of a good thing is a bad thing, so be careful of your health. But fat is a good thing. And when we need to do something, we will take glucose out of your fat, and that's how you lose weight. And we're going to use that glucose to charge up an ATP. And then we use the ATP like right away. Right? So we charge it as we need it. All of that, guys, is why we need carbohydrates. That's why we can't just plug into the sun, charge that up. We only know how to do this from carbs. So you eat the carbs, you store the carbs, you use the carbs to get ATP. That's what it comes down to. ADP, what is that? What is ADP? That is your partially charged battery, made up of, again, this should say adenosine. That is a typo on my part, and I do apologize. Adenosine diphosphate, 2 phosphates. They're made of adenine, ribose, 2 phosphates. And this is a dead battery. We cannot use this because if we ripped this phosphate off, then what we would have is a nucleotide for your RNA, and that's a different chapter, and with a different use, and we don't want to do that. We want to make sure we keep these so we can recharge them. So I said the 2 phosphates means we can't get any energy out of it, so we are going to store them. We're going to hold on to these for later. So when we do need to do something, we will charge it into ATP and then use it. That happens in the mitochondria, the powerhouse of the cell. We learned about this in chapter 1, guys. Back to vocab words, catabolic reactions. This is how we are going to use the ATP. Remember, catabolic reactions, you break molecules to release energy. That should not write makes. That's weird. It releases the energy. Right? We don't make it, it comes from the sun. So how are we going to do this? We're going to break down molecules by breaking, the glucose is going to break and use that energy to charge the ATP up. Right? So that's a catabolic reaction, breaking glucose. And then once we have ATP, we are going to break that to use that little bit of energy. That is a catabolic reaction. Remember, catabolic, think fireworks. Right? That's fireworks or catabolic reactions. You break things in an explosive way to release energy. Catabolic kaboom! And by makes, again, I said, and releases energy. When we break the bond, energy comes out, and that's the energy we live off of. That ATP then loses a phosphate, it becomes ADP, which we will keep. We do not get rid of that. We will hold on to it and we will recharge it later. Anabolic reactions, that is us building molecules, and that takes energy. Glucose is going to be built to store energy in ATP. That is photosynthesis right here. They're photosynthesis in one sentence. Plants are going to make glucose so that they can store energy. ATP is built to energize our bodies. Yeah, that's what's happening in this picture here. We have ADP. We're going to add a phosphate. We're going to build an ATP. And like I said, that takes energy. ADP will get energy from the carbs, from the glucose, and now it's in that molecule. ADP will become ATP. So I said photosynthesis in one sentence. Let's go into a little bit more detail about that. Photosynthesis is light energy to chemical energy, or solar energy into food energy. The plant is going to take water because you have to water your plants for a reason, guys. This is why. The water is going to go up these roots, and then the plant is going to breathe in CO2. And breathe is probably not the best word, but I think it gets my point across. It absorbs carbon dioxide. The sunlight is going to energize a chemical reaction. It's going to force these chemicals together into making something bigger and better. And that bigger, better thing is glucose. It's going to take 6 carbon dioxide molecules and 6 water molecules, and 6 carbons and your 6 waters, and what you're left with is 6 O2s, 6 of them. And that the plant doesn't want them. It just gets rid of them, and that's great for us because we can breathe this oxygen. And then when we eat the plant, we'll get this carb. Speaking of eating carbs and breathing oxygen, cellular respiration is what you are going to do after you eat and breathe. Cellular respiration is turning that food back into energy. No, not solar energy. We cannot make sunlight. We're going to make usable energy for us. The first step, glycolysis. And you get like 2 ADP, so ATP from glycolysis. This happens outside the mitochondria, right? This just happens on its own. Then your mitochondria takes these broken pieces and puts them through something called the Krebs cycle, a whole bunch of chemical reactions that is ripping these molecules apart, rearranging them, ripping them again, and you're getting a whole bunch of energy. But what you're really doing is preparing the molecules for the third step called the electron transport chain. And that is basically a really big Rube Goldberg machine. Have you ever heard of Rube Goldberg? If you've never heard of Rube Goldberg, talk to Mr. Wilson. He teaches that. But the long and short of it is a very complicated machine of a whole bunch of different moving parts. So that's what this is, a whole bunch of different moving parts that is, each moving part is going to be doing something about releasing energy. And that's what this is. This is your major ATP production line, where you get 2 ATP from glycolysis, 2 from the Krebs cycle, and 34 from the electron transport chain, all from one glucose. So let's talk about glycolysis in particular. Glycolysis, I still have highlighted here, breaks the carbohydrate and makes a very small amount of ATP. And then there's a fork in the road. From there, you can do one of 2 things. the Krebs cycle inside the mitochondria, or fermentation, which is what happens when you don't have oxygen. So Krebs cycle uses oxygen and the broken carbohydrate, and I should write Krebs cycle and electron transport chain. Kind of lump these two together. So hopefully I'll remember to make that pop up right here. Right. Those two things together inside your mitochondria are going to make a lot of ATP, and that is what we need to survive. As multicellular organisms, we can't survive solely on fermentation. It doesn't make enough for us. We need the mitochondria to do its job. As I said, fermentation doesn't use oxygen. It only makes a little bit of ATP. I'm not going to spend too much time on fermentation because it's only a backup system. So just let me say real quick, do you ever work out to the point of feeling the burn? Right? That's fermentation, the burn, where you are trying to break open these molecules without oxygen. It's much more difficult, and you create acid as a byproduct. That acid burns, but you do get a little bit of energy. You actually get a lot more energy with oxygen by putting it through the Krebs cycle. So that's the better way of doing it. So that is it for the basics. We're going to go into more detail about how photosynthesis and cellular respiration really work in the next two videos. And they'll be pretty short videos. But until then, check out Google Classroom, see if I left you any work, and I will see you in the next video.